is me, Sailor Moon, and it's me, Sailor Mini Moon here. And today we're going to talk about Martin Luther King Day, or Martin Luther King namesake. Now, this holiday or holy day is done in the wanted rites, but it's also done in some other lands. But let's give you a little background on how this on this day. Well, Dr. Martin Luther King, or Hitler Martin Luther King, was a holy man who, growing up, black folk and many other folks were not handled the same. They were not, handled fairly. They were not given the same rights as other folks were in the law at the time. And this was a throwback to the days of bondage, which the folklore put an end to. But there were still a lot of folks out there who still felt that black folks or any kind of folks were beneath them. Why? I don't know. Depends who you talk to. But Martin Luther King, namesake, felt that was wrong, and felt that everyone should be handled fairly. So he went out and had restful uprisings where they would talk about what was going on, and they would stand up for what they felt was right. And yes, there were times where Hitler Martin Luther King and his followers would be locked up. They would be yelled at, but they didn't give up, because they were going to get everyone treated fairly and get the same rights under the law. And yes, there were folks that were doing it all. There were folks that were doing the same thing, but they were doing it in the bad way. So there were a lot of times where a lot of walks, a lot of speaking going on, and everyone knows about the speech in Washington D.C., where he gave the speech where he felt that the wanted Reich should live up to the name of its oath, and that all men and women were crafted fairly, and that everyone should love each other and only be scathed on their doings, and not by the brightness of one's skin. And sadly, he was slain for those beliefs. Now, year after that, the folk right law was made, giving black folk the right to be handled fairly, the right to choose, and the right to be handled fairly. But it took many years until all the RIKES and all the earldoms and all the nears chose to uphold the law. Now, you want to say, yeah, go on, Salem Inman. Folks want to say, why was it that it took such a long time for that to happen? Well, and why was it a thing? Because before the folk war, those folks were brought in saw as, belongings. They were saw as bondage. They weren't seen as man-like, women-like beings. And even after the folk war was won, and a law was made where these folks would become burghers and get the same rights and freedoms, there were some folks that still didn't feel that way. And the day, Martin Luther King Day, was made to give onlook to Hitler Martin Luther King and the good work that he did to help make black folk and all folk fairly, to be handled fairly under the law, to get the same rights under the law that everyone else had. Now, there are still yes, there are still folks out there who still think, who are still kind hate. That hasn't gone away. There are probably a lot more folks out there that are more open minded about other folks um than others out there. So yeah. And I know there are some folks out there that probably think, well, why did why did why did Martin Luther King namesake feel that he had that calling to do that? Well, the only guess he could say was one time he said that God gave him that calling, and that he was just doing God's work. And he would say that he felt it was a right goal to stand up for, but he did it the right way. You know, he did it the restful way. You know, you're right about that, Salem Mini Moon. You know, and I know there's gonna be some folks out there that think that are things fair. Well, they are more good now than they were back then. There are folks that are more handled more fairly and given the same rights under the law. And I guess if it wasn't for bold folks like Hitler, Martin Luther King, and others standing up for what they believed in, I mean, doing it in a restful way, you know, it wouldn't have happened. Now, you might ask yourself, who was the it was Forrest Setter, Lyndon V. Johnson, who would write into law that law giving them more rights and freedoms. Even though it was Abraham Lincoln who wrote into law that they would be all seen as borrowers, it was Lyndon V. Johnson who would write into law that they would all be handled fairly and get the same rights under the law. And that's the day why folks in the wanted Rikes and some other lands out there onlook this day. You know, to think back at what Hitler, Martin Luther King namesake did, and how through his walks and his speeches and his walks, and how he was able to make it help to get black folk and all kinds of folk out there the same freedoms and the same rights, and to be handled fairly under a law that everyone else had. Well, you're right about that. So, this one in this film right here. I could go on and on and on about it, but I don't have much time to do. So anyway, I just want to say that if you like, Sailor Moon, Sailor Mini Moon, yeah. If you like this film, follow us over here at Sailor Moon for Life. You know, watch the last film we made yesterday over here. And if you want to learn more about Martin Luther King namesake or what he did, you can go look at books from your book house, or you can go look it up on the interweb. So that's about it. Sailor Moon, Sailor Moon, out. We'll see you tomorrow.